Weight loss coach Dan Quabo here, founder of the Bacon Experiment, founder of Keto Camp. Today's interview is probably gonna blow your mind just a little bit. Um, there's so much to this story, and I'm not really going to give you guys too many spoilers, but I am going to say that during this video, you're really going to learn what's possible with keto. And I hope that this inspires you, motivates you. My friend Mike, he has lost 66 of these. 66. So this is 5 pounds right here. Mike has lost 330 pounds on keto. Not many people can say that, guys. This is, TV Biggest Loser type of stuff we're talking about. So I really feel like Mike has a lot to offer. He has a lot of unique perspectives on what it's like to do this. And yet his story is very similar to my own. I've lost 90 pounds on keto, but Mike's is very similar, and he also throws in a few curveballs that you don't expect during this interview, which further just blew my mind. Like the fact that he took the weight off a few years ago, so he had lost all the weight, got down to around the 200-pound mark from 540 pounds. And then regained the weight and had to lose it again. So he talks about that, how he did it. We talk about food addiction. We talk about calories. I give you guys lots of takeaways during this. So Mike shares, what his actual diet looks like day to day. What are the exact foods he was eating when he was losing this crazy amount of weight? We talk a little bit about mindset. Try to get into the details, right? What does this look like day to day? What does it feel like to be somebody that is 540 pounds? We get into a lot of different things. I think you guys are going to take a lot away from this interview. It is about an hour long, so you could go ahead and pause this video right now. Go make yourself a drink, right? Make a coffee, grab yourself a water, and really be able to focus and, take in the whole thing, because it really is a mind-blowing story that Mike's going to share with us. So again, guys, let's jump into the interview. Hope you guys enjoy this. This photo here that you guys can see on the screen just gives you a little bit of an idea of, just how dramatic his transformation has been. It's been life-changing for him. He saved his own life, and now Mike's just working hard on maintenance, and I think that's a really good focus for him right now. I think he's really on the right track. It's not really easy until he ended up getting to this, low carb, paleo, keto, and then even just recently he did a carnivore type of experiment. So that's kind of the transition that I see a lot of people go through. And to be able to get to their goal weight, to be able to break out of that food addiction cycle, to be able to maintain it. Some of us do have to go a little more extreme in our approach to be successful. And, if you're willing to do whatever it takes, there's always an answer there. I believe, everybody that's watching this video right now, you can get all the way to your goal weight, and it's just a matter of figuring things out. It's going to take some time. There's always lots to learn. So anyways, without me talking anymore, let's just talk to Mike and see what he has to say. And I hope you guys enjoy this. Please heart this video. Please share it out everywhere. It is quite a dramatic story. His story is very, very impressive. And like I said, not too many people on the planet have been able to do what Mike's done. So please help get the word out there. You guys are what, helps us spread the message. So without further ado, here is my friend Gormy. So obviously, you don't look like the same as you did at, what was your highest weight? 540? Is that?
Yeah, 540 was my highest ever, yes.
Wow. How long has this journey been for you?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's been my whole life. 540 was actually, where are we now? 2020. I was over 500 pounds for most of the early to mid 2000s. My heaviest was like 2008, 2009. And I started losing weight. I was following more of a paleo diet then. And by 2013, which was my 40th birthday, I was down to 210 pounds. It was May of 2013. I hit 210. And this is a part of my story that's hard for some people. But I actually I put on 270 pounds in less than 6 months. By October of 2013, I was 480 pounds again. I fell completely, obviously off the rails, rolled. I
Hmm.
was the snowball rolling down the hill that became, the giant boulder. And I spent a lot of time then just basically accepting that that was my life and where I was headed and what I was doing. And the funny thing is, we're talking the week that we're talking, we're a few days, 2 days away from my 3-year anniversary keto. So it was 3 years ago in February. I was 470 pounds, and um, I honestly think my weight was coming down at that point because of out of control diabetes. That was never really officially diagnosed because I was
Hmm.
avoiding doctors like the plague, literally. But I knew I kind of kept up on diets and all of those things, and I had read a couple books. I read Jimmy Moore's Keto Clarity. I read Vinnie Tortorich's Fitness Confidential, and they resonated with me with in terms of like things I was reading and what I had known about what I had done with. I had kind of gotten really low carb paleo towards the end, and keto was starting to become a buzzword. So I dove in. I'm an all or nothing kind of guy when it comes to weight loss and obviously weight gain. I like
Hmm.
to say that I'm really good at losing weight and really good at gaining it. Keeping it off is my challenge. So I started that journey in February of 2017, and it was fall of last year that I kind of hit the end point of the loss portion of my journey. It was probably around November, October, November, that I switched over from focusing consistently on weight loss and starting to learn about maintenance. And that I
Hmm.
think is obviously, like you were saying, like the biggest challenge I think for most of us that deal with a weight issue is we know we can figure out losing weight. We can figure out what tool we're going to need, what's going to help us. And for me, that was definitely keto, obviously this time. And in a lot of ways, as I went on this journey, I realized that keto was something that was more sustainable for me than almost anything else. And so I've been kind of working in that maintenance space for a couple months now. And it's actually the longest I've ever kept weight off ever in my life. I'm 46. I'll be 47 in a few months, and this is the first time that I feel like I'm at the wheel of what's going on. I don't
Hmm.
there's an end point. I feel like I've just kind of allowed my journey to continue. And like you said, my I've been keto and it's slightly carnivore. I'm doing a carnivore kind of experiment this month because I'm really working on um, trying to be mindful and intuitive with my eating and move away. I did 14 months of really strict tracking of macros
Hmm.
and calories, and so I'm trying to learn what my relationship with food is really like when I take away some of those tools. And so I decided to start that part of this journey with a carnivore month, and then I'll work on kind of what comes next when it comes next.
Would you consider yourself, or do you think that you're a carb addict?
Oh, completely. I think when I regained all that weight,
Hmm.
the to very quickly tell a very long story, I'll tell you that I had gone on vacation for my birthday, did really great on vacation, staying to my diet. Again, like I said, was really like it was mostly like green vegetables and protein and fat was really kind of my paleo at that point.
Hmm.
And I wasn't like one of those people doing a lot of sweet potatoes and all those things. I knew that carbs were my challenge, and I wasn't feeling that great after traveling. Picked something up on the airplane, um, and had started to allow myself a cheat meal because I felt like I did so good. I had that
Hmm.
voice convincing me that you earned a couple of things that are off your plan. So I was at Whole Foods picking up. I was planning to pick up broccoli and chicken, so I got broccoli and chicken. And then I also realized that the caramel bacon brownie that they brought out monthly was available. So I decided I earned one of those, and I decided to get some ice cream to go with it. And I was going to have a cheat meal. And by the
Hmm.
time I checked out at the register, I was so giddy at the idea of this meal that I decided that I was going to have a cheat night, that I was going to turn that day into a cheat day. And so I hit a drive-through on the way home. I went to McDonald's right near my house, and I was buying, Big Macs and French fries and the carbs, and hadn't eaten any of those things in years. And as soon as I put it in my body, it was like a fire was ignited. Like my body knew what it was and was excited that it was back. And I think every deflated fat cell in my body was just sitting there waiting. And I kind of fell into this place of uh, alcoholics talk about benders, and I was on a bender. I went on a real bender, and even when I started keto. So when I came back around to keto, I started keto in February of 2017, and the summer of that year, um, I had hit a point that was just rough mentally and a little disillusioned, and decided that I needed a cheat week, and that cheat week turned into a month. And I ended up reining myself back in, but I put 40 pounds on in that month.
Hmm.
And it was just because when with eating a ketogenic diet, satiation is a reality. I get full. I feel like the physical hunger goes away. When I'm eating those other foods, when I'm eating those carb dense foods, especially the highly processed ones, the hunger never goes away for me. Like
Yeah.
there's always room for more, and there's always a desire for more, like a burning desire for more. That's hard to control, and that's something that I battled with, and it's one of the reasons why, when I was to a certain point in my journey, like I started kind of on that lazy, dirty keto track that a lot of people do. I was just tracking net carbs and not really counting my fat and protein, but just eating what I knew was kind of the ketogenic model in terms of modeling my plate. And I hit a point where I was starting to put weight on again, and I was plateauing, and saw my weight go up by about 15 pounds. And I was terrified. I knew what that meant. I knew what it meant if I got out of control. And I decided I needed help. So I enlisted the help of a coach and started doing more of a strict keto diet. Like I said, for 14 months, tracked every macro, every calorie, every gram.
Mhm.
And it was funny because a lot of people talk about, restriction being something that can cause problems. But I think for me, by going to that restricted place for that length of time, gave me a chance to really work on my mindful relationship with food, and my relationship with my carb addiction and with my food addiction in general. And I started to learn what it meant to be physically hungry and what it meant to just have mental cravings, and what was the difference. And you start to realize that you can cope differently with a mental craving than you can with true physical hunger. Like true physical
Mm.
hunger doesn't just fade because you have a glass of water. It doesn't fade because you go for a walk. If your body really needs something, is craving a nutrient, your body's going to keep telling you that it needs that. If it's your head playing games with you, like my head is wont to do, um, I can get myself out of that place, through some focused, not I wouldn't say it's like my meditation or structured or anything along those lines, but um, thinking about it and identifying what's going on and realizing, trying to think about where it comes from. I think that was the big part missing from a lot of my weight loss journeys before, like learning to be mindful about what I'm doing and trying to think about where my mindset is at and how am I approaching what I'm doing, and not approaching this journey as it has a finish line. Was something that I used to do all the time. Like you hit an end point and you're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Like that's, I think it's something a lot of us do. And
Hmm.
instead I realized that constant redefining of goals is important, constantly having something to work towards. And like right now, I'm not working towards seeing the scale change. I'm working towards seeing the scale stay the same. Like I've said, that's
Hmm.
my goal for the year, is to work on maintenance for a year. Like people have asked, like, are you going to try to go, is Gormy going to go to the gym and work on a bulk? Are you going to start lifting heavy? Are you going to get into anything like that? And, I don't know what the future brings when it comes to any of those things, but I know for right now, I'm not worried about trying to learn about how my body handles putting on weight intentionally or any of those things that people go through. Like now I'm working on, how do I live a life that I can sustain and not worry every day. Something a realization I came to recently was that for many years I didn't trust myself. Like I took that trust away because I knew I hadn't really earned it, and I feel like now I'm getting back to a place where I've earned trust in myself. Like I've earned listening to the voices inside of me, and how my body is hungry and what those things mean. And so building back that trust, I think, is a really important part of what I've been working on.
For a long time, I wasn't ready to say that, carbs are addictive.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a food addiction. It's not a real addiction. I wasn't ready
Mm-hmm.
because I felt like you might be disrespecting people that, where they've died of overdoses
Right.
and people addicted. So, but really, I mean, you're killing yourself. You're just killing yourself slower. It is very real. It's very real.
Oh, I was
You know?
completely killed. I was completely killed. I had given up on life. It was a slow suicide, but it was suicide completely.
Yeah, and I know when you're talking about that inner voice, and we're really good at making excuses or reasons why you can do
Mm-hmm.
this now, and it's okay. It's my birthday, it's a
Mm-hmm.
holiday, and I've fallen off the wagon many many times. It's been for me, it's been since I was 13 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Obese then, and never got to that point. I was maybe 100 pounds overweight kind of thing. It was about. well, I'd always do another diet, basically
Mm-hmm.
a diet. So, and I would have that endpoint in mind, hit that endpoint for like a day, like literally a day,
Oh yeah.
and start going back up,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd lost some muscle during that. And so then you gain it back and you gain back more.
Oh yeah.
But wow, like you've really, when you said you gained back, what was it, 200 pounds in 6 months or
270 pounds.
270 in six
Yeah.
months? Wow. So, I mean, if that's not food addiction, I don't know what is.
Mm.
And I want to point this out just because I kind of feel like a lot of people could see this video. I mean, I'm going to put it out everywhere, and I hope that people share this, right? Because I mean,
Mm.
I want to give takeaways. And you already have given some takeaways and
Mm.
stuff for people to think about. Um, so there's a few things that I kind of want to go over. So one thing is, when you did start dialing things in,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about that for a minute, because I see a lot of people already asking that. They
Yep.
want to know the nitty gritty. They want to know
Oh
the
yeah.
details. What are the macros? What are the certain foods? And I think those
Mm-hmm.
do matter, right? There's certain foods that are much more filling than others.
Oh yeah.
Was there a core set of foods that you kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuck with, or was it a lot of different choices? Or did you, when you found some that worked, did you just stick with those over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over? Is that kind of how you kind
Well,
of dial things in, or?
For me, I think it's a little bit different to start with because I had never really tracked macros tightly before, and even calories had never really tracked tightly before.
Mhm,
So when I started working with my coach, and one of the big changes we made was I went from tracking net carbs to tracking total carbs. And the amount of total carbs I was eating was really restricted. We started me at 20, and eventually, for the majority of my time, I was eating 10 total carbs a day, 10 grams.
mhm,
Which then kind of creates some restriction in that area. Like a lot of people hear 10 grams of carbs and they think, well, that's like 1/5 of a Quest bar. So how could you even,
mhm,
how are you living? And what you don't realize is, 10 grams is a whole lot of spinach, is a whole lot of, green vegetables. Like it's a lot
mhm,
more than you think. Um, but I think for me in the beginning, like I thought if I'm going to be that restricted in terms of tracking, I needed to be as creative as possible with what I was eating. I needed variety. I craved variety. Like I used to
yeah,
say that all the time. Like if I'm not eating variety, I'm not going to live. And so I did my best, in the beginning, I think, to vary every meal and vary every day. And I would do some meal. I'm very much known amongst my friends for on a Sunday, I would meal prep something and be like, for 7 days, I'm going to eat this. And then 2 days
mhm,
in, I'm like, that's out the window. That's in the freezer. I'm done. I'm on to something else. And then I think eventually, like you're saying, I realized that there were different foods that made me feel different ways. There were some things that fit my calories and macros, but I still would be hungry after I ate them. Didn't give me that
mhm,
same satiation. Like one of the things that I learned for me is, and I think this is something you've probably dealt with a lot, through the work that you do and people you talk to, like there's at the core, keto is about carb restriction, but then how you balance everything else out can almost be very individualistic. There's different
mhm,
camps. There's the higher fat ratio and the higher protein ratio. And for me, I found that like mental clarity and physical, how I feel well-being and satiation of cravings comes when I have a higher fat percentage. So I'm up
mhm,
in that like 75 to 80% fat percentage for most of my time eating tracked keto. And
mhm,
when we've played with that and taken the protein higher and the fat down, I've noticed a difference. So I think one of the things that has come through that experience for me is learning how my body responds to different levels of macronutrients and micronutrients and how I physically respond to those different things. But I've learned that here's one of the big things for me. Like when I was paleo, I ate a lot of chicken, like
mhm,
chicken. I was a chicken thigh. Like I could make chicken thighs 100 different ways. Like I loved chicken thighs, you get some great fat there. It's fattier than
mhm,
breast, but I also love a good air chilled organic chicken breast. Like those things taste great to me. But I've learned that if I eat most of my protein from chicken, I'm often hungry at the end of the day. Like
yeah,
it's not as satiating for me unless if I eat some good red meat. Like I eat well sourced meat most of the time. Like I'm big. I think that's a holdover from the paleo days. Like learning about pasture raised and grass fed and all of those things and
yeah,
quality um, but I find red meat to be more satiating. I find, pork can be something depending on what form it's in. If it's a sausage, I might not be as satiated as I am if I have like a roasted pork shoulder or a pork steak or something along those lines. Like,
mhm,
so I think I did learn there are different, and then also when you're restricting your carbs and tracking them that tightly, it's almost like you start to think about it like a bank account. Like, how am I going to spend, like, with people, the language you use at times is, how am I going to spend my carbs today? Like, how am I planning to spend my carbs? At
Mhm.
first, I was trying to fit in a lot of things like nut butters. Like, I'm a certified nut butter addict as well. Like, carb addict, food addict, nut butter addict. Like, um, there's a company, again, when I talk about it, I don't like to name them because I don't want to, shame the brand or anything along those
Yeah.
lines. It's a nut butter company that creates, keto nut butters, macro ratio wise, but they're meant to taste like desserts, and I have a lot of hard time controlling those. And one weekend, while fully keto, I ate 4 jars of one of those nut butters that I had gotten on a deal on Amazon. I think some of those foods still trigger me. So, and I think we hear this all the time. It's cliche to say, like, why would you turn back to even substitutes for the foods that you had trouble controlling when you couldn't control them? So, treats and baked
Hmm.
goods and those things. Like, I've learned that they have their place, but they don't necessarily have a regular rotation on my plate. Like, I find that I feel better and I perform better in life in general when I'm getting, the carbs that I am eating. I'm getting them you know from vegetable sources and from, kind of less processed, and a little more in a pure form. And sometimes that means, like, I'm counting the carbs in seafood, because some of those shellfish, have a little more carbs than something else. But um, I think it's learning those lessons about how do you feel when you eat different foods. And I know people, honestly, like, I see them all the time, like friends that are very successful, having a keto dessert every day. They eat egg loaf every day and pour,
Hmm.
sugar-free syrup on it, and they thrive and they don't live with cravings. And I think that's great. I'm all for someone who can find a way to make things work for them. But I know for me that if I make a keto cheesecake and have a slice every day, by a couple days in, I want real cheesecake. That's I'm gunning hard for real cheesecake. Like, I
Yeah.
don't really get satisfied by most, like, uh, there are a lot of people that rave about. There's a lot of ice creams now that are out there that have great, higher fat content and low carb and all of that, and
Hmm.
people love them, and I think that's great. And they can taste good, but for me, they don't hit the same buttons as regular ice cream. So again, it
Yeah.
awakens that beast inside of me that wants the regular ice cream. So I have it, and I'm great at, like, I used to take a pint of one of those certain ice creams and portion it into 4 little containers and put it in the freezer and just eat one of them and be fine. But the next day I wanted more, and the next day I wanted more, and I would be thinking about regular ice cream. And so for me, the types of foods that I choose, I think, became really important. And that's been one of the big things. Like, with one of the things I'm doing with this carnivore month is I've eliminated all sweeteners at all, like anything that has any added sweeteners to it. So even stevia and
Hmm.
erythritol and the commonly accepted, allulose, the commonly accepted keto sweeteners. It's not
Tried
easy.
to
I'll
cut
be
them.
honest with you. My chocolate collagen in my coffee is something that I've grown to love. But I've also learned that, like, my Zip Fizz for my electrolytes has, in some ways, evolved to be more of a treat and less of, a
Mm.
tool. Like,
Yeah.
I'm getting those nutrients different ways now, and seeing some of those cravings and those wild things that used to come into my head still fade. So does it mean they're gone forever? Probably not. Like, I'm a realistic person. I know that there's going to be times in my life where I make different choices. Like, I'm by no means going to be someone that's going to be able to say I could happily live strict carnivore forever. But I do say, and I say this a lot. Like, I get questions from people like, so you're keto and you say you're going to be keto forever. So does that mean you'll never eat cake again? That mean you'll never have X, Y, and Z again?
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, like, I like to say, like, so, like, one of the things that I'm really excited about, like, I'm down 265 pounds on keto. I'm 205 pounds. Like, I can fit into an airplane seat pretty well now. I can fit into an airplane bathroom. Those are things I could never do before. And so I want to travel the world. Like, I really am looking to go overseas. And if I'm in Paris and I'm standing outside of a bakery that makes the best croissant in the world, am I going to try that? Possibly. I don't. If I'm in that, or if I'm in Italy, am I going to have pasta? Like, those situations could happen, but I do say that I wake up every day thinking that I won't do those things ever in my life. Like, I wake up every
Hmm.
day saying I can live and thrive without cake. I can live and thrive without pasta. Does it mean down the line that I might try something or have a bite of something or whatever? That's not the point. The point is that I'm okay with seeing life without those things. I know that I can live as a happy person without those things in my life. And that's the big shift for me. Like it's moving away from that feeling of restriction and looking more into kind of celebrating what I can eat and what makes me feel good and what gives me energy and drive and makes my body feel and look the way it does.
So many, so many good things there, and I can definitely relate to pretty much everything you're saying.
Mm,
And I sure, a lot of people can, and I think there's almost like a journey. It's almost baby steps,
mm,
and then when I hear people's story that I've lost 100 pounds or lost 200 pounds, it's very often similar. They kind of go down a lot of the same road. I just kind of thought of something. That voice that you were talking about earlier. I've always thought of that, and I even named it my inner fat guy.
mm-hmm.
That he's always still there. He's always
Oh yeah.
still there, and and it can be triggered by a lot of those foods. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is that the people that do put out these recipes and do put out the keto desserts and stuff, they've gotten too good at it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
they do an amazing job.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of friends that have put out books and that kind of thing. And I find even they though have moved to more of a keto carnivore type of approach with whole foods. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never really told you, exactly kind of the approach I've ended up at or teach, but it's very similar to what you're talking about. It's whole
Mm-hmm.
foods. It's around 10 to 15 grams of carbs.
Mm-hmm.
I've put together about 140 different meals for people set
Mm-hmm.
with that kind of macros, and it's about a 1-to-1 fat to protein. So when you start thinking about that, it's like, okay, there's twice as much energy or more than that in the fat. So it is still really high fat, even though it's a
Right,
one to
right.
one, right?
Mm-hmm.
People think of it maybe as a higher protein, but it's even and it's mostly
Oh yeah.
fat. And then when you consider all the body fat too on top of it, it's still a very high fat, approach.
Oh yeah.
And I think a few things, and I find all the same stuff as you that, cutting out certain keto foods just because it's keto
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And some people do seem to be able to get away with that. Now, have you ever listened to Dr. Robert Sives at all? He talks about addiction a lot. I mean, there's probably a
Oh
few
yeah.
people talking
Mm-hmm.
about it now. And that's where I've kind of landed this year because, I've been able to help some people. Like, well, one of my clients, I'm not going to name her, but she probably wouldn't care if I did, but she lost 75 pounds. She reversed her type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
And over the holidays, she fell off and was like,
Mm,
all in again, right? And I was like, let's just, so I had to, and she was, and we always beat ourselves up. We get really upset, and then that just makes it
mm,
worse. You eat to make yourself feel better. And that's a lot of the addiction part. It's the comfort. You get that dopamine and that feel good. The
mm.
serotonin goes up. All the reward centers light up. And so it makes you feel good for like 20 minutes,
Oh yeah.
and then you're doing it again. So that's the problem is that it's a short-term band-aid or fix. And yes, it does actually make you feel better. You can actually, that's measurable. You can do a brain scan and see all that. You can see your
Oh
dopamine
yeah.
levels go up. But it's a short-term thing, and you get caught in that cycle. It's very easy to happen. It's happened to
Mm,
me. And that's why even on my birthday now, I won't have a piece of cake or I
mm,
won't have stuff like that. And I used to, and I just finally had to realize like, wow, I have a problem. Like this is a real addiction. I can't
mm.
do it. So now my family understands, like no matter where I go, if I go to my in-laws or whatever, they, if cake comes out, they know Dan's going to go and be on his phone. He's probably helping somebody, right? Answering their questions about
Yeah.
keto. And that's what I do. I really do. Now I just want to, I don't know if you're starting to find this, but for maintenance, I'm finding one of the most important things, and I've been talking about this with different clients and stuff. I feel like once you've kind of done it or you've lost some weight or lost all your weight and got to your goal, I think one thing that is very, very powerful is helping other people. And I really
Mm,
don't think if I wasn't helping others and teaching this now and kind of getting all into it, because that's what it has took to make it, or I feel like
mm,
I've beaten obesity, at least for now. It's helping other people. It's,
mhm,
always learning and empowering them. And then they rely on you, and then you're accountable to them, right? Because they're
mhm.
looking up to you and looking to you for answers. And I feel like that's how we make it long term. They do it, then they're helping others. So you got to think of, and your story is so impressive, it's going to get people's attention. They're going to stop and be like, whoa, okay, how'd this guy do this? And they're going to
Mhm.
want to know. And when you start telling them, they're going to be interested. They're going to want to learn more. And I think because of keto and how quickly it starts working, and or carnivore, And I feel like carnivore is even better at breaking people out of that addiction cycle. It's
Mm,
even stronger because it's so strict, because it's like a bit of an elimination. There's vegetables that you can have that aren't going to trigger those, like you were saying, all the greens and that. You can
yeah,
have a lot of that kind of stuff. What fills you up the most? What do you find
sure.
for the longest time, even too?
Well, it's funny. Like I would say, obviously, steaks of all kind. Ribeye specifically is a favorite, which obviously I think is big amongst a lot of keto people because the good fat content. But a good, a nicely. I love a good rare steak. I don't. I'm not a raw meat person. There's
Mhm.
people out there doing that now. That's not
Yeah.
me. I cook my meat. But steak, ground beef, in a variety of dishes seasoned. I feel like, as plain as ground beef can sound, there's a lot of different ways, that it can be seasoned, and depending on what you cook it in and cook it with, and like all of those things
Mhm.
can create a lot of different flavor profiles. But you can get some real solid satiation from that. I think as far as when it comes to like the vegetable side of things, like for me, it's things like baby spinach and baby arugula, and tossing those with some
Mhm.
olive oil or something along those lines, or even the drippings when I'm cooking the meat, like things like that. I love. I've fallen in love with with a sous vide, the sous vide machine. Like I love doing
Yeah.
a nice chuck roast. I feel like that's something I can eat from for a while. Pork shoulder, like I have some local sources for bacon that isn't really heavily cured, and that can be very satiating to me. That can be something that like I really enjoy. Avocado, I think is something that is a great fills me up
Mhm.
really well. Um, things the more kind of basic along those lines. I've fallen in love with. I mean, it's cliche. Here we go with another cliche, but like cauliflower in all of its forms. There's the memes going
Yeah.
around where you're
Yeah.
you're
I've
you're
seen that. Yeah.
you know, you want cake, eat cauliflower. You want this, eat cauliflower. But like honestly, for me, like simply taking a head of cauliflower and breaking it up and throwing it in the air fryer or roasting it in a really hot oven, like is almost feels almost decadent. But it's not something where I'm going to eat a 15 quart bowl of roasted cauliflower. Like I can eat it and have enough and be okay. Brussels sprouts, like a lot of those
Mhm.
those vegetables along those lines. Cabbage, I think, can do some amazing things. I have found like things like cheese can be really triggering for me, like something that I have
Mhm.
a hard time kind of just controlling out of hand. But if I use it properly, it can be great to kind of add some flavor and not really drive a dish crazy. Like I'm a really big fan of like aged, like really funky blue cheese, and you're not going to eat 6 ounces
Mhm.
of really funky, you know, deep blue cheese. Like most human beings. I mean, there's probably someone out there saying I ate 12 ounces yesterday. But I know for me, like putting an ounce or two of that on a bowl of ground beef, adds this amazing depth of flavor, and gives me that kind of cheese experience. Not in the, excuse me, not in the same way of making like a keto lasagna with a pound of cheese in it that I can eat and then still go back for more later, like something along those lines. So I think finding ways to hit flavor is really important. You become a master of spices. You become a master of
Yeah.
using different flavor profiles like heat and kind of real depth with like cumin and different peppers and things along those lines.
Yeah, and I do that a lot. Like I'll do simple meals like that where, and I get locally sourced meat as
Mm.
well. Actually, I get one of those box deliveries from,
Oh,
it's a
great.
place called True Local up here in Canada,
Mm.
and they ship me a box every month, and I always look it up. I look up because it's some of them are from different places, some of the different
Mm.
stuff in this box. So I'll look it up and be like 20 minutes from my house. Like, oh, here's a farm that does grass fed beef, and
Oh, wow.
there's a pasture raised pork place that's like 40 minutes from my house, and it's pretty neat that way. And
Mm.
um, yeah, bacon's been one of my key things,
Oh,
but
yeah.
definitely there is something called deli bacon, and it's like 5 grams of carbs per two slices.
Mm.
So when I'm recommending it, I'll say to people like try to get zero. Like there's lots of zero carb ones
Oh,
out there,
yeah.
so why not just stick with that? And then some people will even go with pork belly. I've
Mm.
looked into all the kind of stuff with bacon, and like I found the nitrates aren't actually a real
Yeah.
concern. And but yeah, you do got to watch the
Not at
carb
all.
count because it can creep up there. Yeah, you kind of give a lot of good little things where people can take away. And I agree with everything you said. All those are awesome, really filling, hard to overeat. I would say the most filling things I found are I would say eggs. For
Mm,
me, eggs are very filling, like per calorie kind of thing. Like they're, 5 or 6 eggs is pretty substantial, and that's only like 300 calories, which is
mhm,
pretty low, nothing. Um, and I find salmon, like any fish like
mm,
that. I'm not a huge fan of salmon,
mm,
but it's there's a lot of omega-3 fats in there. I find it really filling. I did a lot of experiments for like a week at a time. Like I did bacon for 30 days, but I did
right,
chicken for a week, and I did salmon for a week and eggs for a week, just to see like what is this, only this food, because usually
right,
you're having a mix, right? So you don't ever know what is satiating or what isn't.
right.
So I did that. I did a lot of experimenting, and
Nice.
um, I found certain ones that worked, and it sounds like you've kind of put together a really good food list, or maybe with your coach's help,
Mhm,
and a really solid kind of meal plan or foundation stuff that's not none of that's triggering, and you've discovered a lot of things that are easy to overeat. And the nut butters, totally agree with that too.
mm,
And even like I don't have nut butters on my program. It's all just it's literally, if I had to put it into a nutshell
mhm,
and see if you agree with this, but meats, eggs, seafood, and you could say they lost part in different ways, like above ground vegetables, or green vegetables, or
mm,
non-starchy vegetables. There's different ways to say that.
right,
But if you just stick to those, it
mm,
takes you 10 seconds to tell somebody that. It's like that could change somebody's life if they
oh, yeah,
and if they took it literally. Like,
mhm,
and when you say that, it's like you literally stick to those things. So, and herbs and spices, obviously, salt, pepper, dill. I do the ground beef and just like some chili powder quite
oh,
often.
yeah,
And
mm,
I don't know if you've ever discovered nutritional yeast yet or not, but
mhm,
yeah, I put that stuff in. It gives it a cheesy flavor, bumps up
mm,
the B vitamins. I find my energy comes up when I have that.
nice.
Um, what about supplements or
Mhm.
electrolytes?
I use plenty of sodium. I use salt on my food, and I use a cleaner salt. I take magnesium and I take a potassium supplement every day. So those are like the big three for me when it comes to electrolytes. I've One of the things I've learned, I track my micronutrient intake through my food and supplementation. And
Yeah.
if my sodium and potassium ratio is off on a day, I know I'll see a 5 or 6 pound weight gain on the scale the next day. Like
Oh,
my body can be that sensitive to those things. Like it's
mhm.
wild. And I think that comes with having been so big, that it's our bodies can fluctuate. Like I talk to a lot of guys that have been as big as I was and are now kind of down where I am. And they say, yeah, if they forget to take something and then eat something slightly off, not go crazy. Like I see people do crazy cheat meals and everything. But I talk to guys that accidentally drink something that puts them over their carbs and things along those lines, and they're like, yeah, I'm up 8 pounds today of water. Like,
Yeah.
but learning to understand that it's my body doing that fluctuation. I'm not getting fat,
Yeah.
overnight. Like that's not what's happening. Like is a big part of that mental process of the journey. Like realizing that there's effects to my body that'll probably be there for a long, long time because of how I treated it for years, what my life was like.
Yeah. I find that that's kind of becomes a lot of part of my job, is talking people down and explaining that,
Mm,
after a cheat meal. And I use bacon. Bacon's like a really good way back. It's like if I
mm-hmm,
tell somebody eat 2 pounds of bacon every day for 3 days, that'll put you back into ketosis,
mm-hmm.
get you back in control. They're like, oh, that sounds good. I mean, because bacon is good for a lot of
Right.
people, right?
Oh yeah.
So they're all in, and then they're like, well, that really worked. So, and I'm
Mm,
like, do that every time. And it's going to happen again. You're gonna fall off at times. You're gonna have something
yeah.
that you don't mean to. And what woke me up to the addiction part of things is I was out with my family at the drive-in, and there was some popcorn there, and I thought, I'm going to have a couple pieces of popcorn.
Mm,
It's like 3 grams of carbs. That's nothing, right? I have 20 grams of carbs a day, because
right.
that's how strict I am all the time. Been like that
Mm-hmm.
for years. So, and then my wife all of a sudden goes, "Hon, what are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You ate the popcorn." And I was like, "I didn't eat the popcorn. The kids did." And she's like, "I watched you do it. You were like,
Mm,
you just ate." And like literally one of those buckets, like one of those
yeah.
family-sized buckets, I ate the whole thing. And that just happened like back in the summer. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, I got to learn more about the addiction part of this.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and that's kind of where I've seen like a lot of people have been very successful and do really well. And then, well, like what happened to you? I mean, that's you can't really get more extreme than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
270 pounds in 6 months. It's all a learning experience, the whole thing. And, so And the longer you do it, you start to come up with things. Okay, I know if I'm going to go somewhere like a Christmas party, I'm going to eat a great big keto meal before I go. I'm going to have a 12-ounce steak or something, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And then it suddenly gives you the control back. You're not hungry. So then you can recognize it as, okay, that's, my inner fat guy telling me he wants the sugar.
Oh
And
yeah.
you kind of start recognizing that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think you kind of, touched on a lot of good stuff there that a lot of people can relate with. Now, that's what you're kind of exploring right now still, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
getting a handle on that, and how does the day-to-day go, and
Right.
almost looking at it, like
Mm-hmm.
separating that from yourself and looking at it, what's going on there, and
Mm-hmm.
learning from it. So, is there anything that um, I know you talk about this a lot because you have a podcast. I want to mention that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's called the Fat Guy Forum.
Yes, it
Is that
is.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And generally, are you kind of moved to more towards mindset? Is it like the food part can be covered pretty easily, right? I did it in 10 seconds. That's the food
Yeah.
part of it. So,
My podcast is really the purpose of the podcast. It's not a keto podcast strictly. It's about, I realized there was a not really a space for bringing the stories of men that struggle with weight issues forward in the podcast space. Like
mhm,
there are some great podcasts out there put on by men that are performance athletes that gained 30 pounds and lost the 30 pounds and things
yeah,
along those lines, and some great podcasts focused on women's issues, and women's health is really specific in a lot of the things that they deal with. And I felt like there was a lack of a space for regular guys just to tell their stories of what they dealt with, how they dealt with their weight issues and how they are dealing with their weight issues, what it's like to live at 500, 600 pounds. And so I created the podcast, and the first couple episodes are my story, what life was like for me at 540 pounds, what it was like to lose that weight and put it back on, what, like, why I went keto. All of those things are covered. And then I've had probably at this point over 40 guests that are men
mm,
of all shapes and sizes, all various points of their journeys, telling their stories. And we get into what their relationship with food is. And one of the things that I've learned through having those discussions is um, everyone comes around to find the tool that's going to work for them when it comes to success on these journeys, especially the guys that have lost the weight and kept it off.
mhm,
But it often is more about what's changed. How did that enable a mindset change? How did that enable them to learn from those experiences? How did they learn from their failures? What were their failures like? And that's when I get the most feedback. When I told, I did an episode I called My 540-Pound Life, and that was like, I just went into the nitty gritty of what life is like at that size. Like, what does that mean? Like, you see it on TV, but what does it really mean? Like, what is the bathroom like? What is it like trying to clean yourself? What is it like going to work? What is it like trying to get out to your car? How do you shop? All of those things. And I opened the doors to a lot of almost TMI details of my life. And the sheer number of people that wrote back and said, I thought I was the only person that had to do that. I thought I was the only person that worried about that. I thought I was the only person who had that struggle is amazing. And that's, my audience is men and women. The podcast focuses on the stories of men, but there's something relatable for everyone in there. And like, it resonates. And I hear all the time from people that, and the thing that almost makes me sadder is like, I think now I hear a lot from people that were the me in the beginning, that were my before, and they've never tried to lose weight, and they don't know what to do, and they're terrified, and they're
mhm,
worried they're going to die, and um, they need someone. They need a direction. They need some advice. They need someone to say. And I would say like the number one message that's come out of the podcast, like every guest, to a T. When one of the questions I ask them at the end of the day is, if someone out there listening is you when you started, what is the number one piece of advice you'd give them? And it's always, just get started. Don't worry about perfection. Just do
yeah,
something. Just get started. Just get yourself going. And that's something like I tell people when they ask me about how to, because I think this, existing in the coaching space and in the educator space, like if you Google how to do keto right now, you're going to get 5,000 answers per
yeah,
page that are different answers. And I think people look at that and get overwhelmed. And my advice is always pick one, pick the one that seems the most sustainable to you, the direction that you understand the most. And I usually try to, like you're talking about, give some basics, just try
mhm,
this, instead, like, I have some sites that I refer people to that have very basic breakdowns, like no worrying yet about magical numbers and math and all of that.
yeah,
Like, just think about the food. Here's some very clear, simple food lists. Like, think about that. and just start. And if in 30 days you're not making the progress you want to make, reevaluate and use that 30 days to learn. Use that 30 days to educate yourself, because I think that's also that too often people want to be handed a plan and told what to do.
Yeah.
And like one of the big things with my coach is he very much, sets up your macros for you specifically and adjusts them almost on a daily basis sometimes, like, but more weekly, but, pays attention to what's going on for you every day. And, but he's not big on giving you, here's 2 months of exact meals to eat, like exactly what to eat every day, because
Hmm.
he wants you to, and that was something that at first I was like, no, I need you to tell me exactly what to eat.
Yeah.
That's what I need. But because I think that's the headspace people go into, and some people need that. Some people really do. I understand. I'm not invalidating someone who has no idea what to do or how to start and needs some help in that area. Like, but I think eventually it becomes important that you learn enough about food, that you learn what things make you feel better and satiate you, and you can start to
Yeah.
say, I have my structure, and within my structure, let me try to make some choices, because that starts to become empowering, and that starts to help you learn more. And we have to get over this reticence to be our own best advocates, our own best teachers. Like, use
Hmm.
other people. Like, I would not be where I was if I didn't work with a coach. Like, I say that all the time to people. I invested in myself. It was not cheap. It was something I paid for. Like, but
Yeah.
it was something I needed. It was a tool that I needed. And we ended our coaching client relationship on December 31st at midnight, because I felt like that was very dramatic for social media for it to end at midnight on New Year's Eve.
Hmm.
But I had reached a point where I didn't need him anymore. And that's okay. It's okay to realize that. But it's okay also to realize sometimes that you do need someone. Like, it's it's scary out there in this world, like in this weight loss world. It's scary out there in the
Yeah.
keto space. Like, if you need a helping hand, if you need someone to be that person who's going to help you recover from a cheat meal and recover from something like that, and handle those mistakes and learn those lessons, don't be afraid to say you need that help, and find a resource to get you that help. Like, definitely.
Yeah. And that's because it took me so long and there was so much misinformation. And that's why I'm
Mm,
doing this. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. I walked away from actually a really successful career. Like, we sold our house. We like
mm,
all in on this 100%, because it was like right away once I kind of did it for myself. And I realized there's so many landmines. There's so many things that I could save people months and years possibly, right?
mm.
Of struggling in that kind of wasteland.
Oh yeah.
And even before I found keto, it was the same thing. I was Googling for a long time, and I ended up on a vegan diet, a plant-based, like a fruitarian type of diet.
Mm-hmm.
Did juice fast, did everything, like all these different things, right? And every time I thought, this is it. This is the thing that's going to
Oh
work,
yeah.
right? This is the thing. And, and there's so much misinformation that I don't know,
Mm.
I've called it the sea of bullshit before, because
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of what it is. Uh, and then when I, became a coach and was trying to help people, no one believes you, because if I show real results that I'm getting for people, people just think it's fake, because there's so much fakery out there,
Mm,
so they don't even kind of believe that it's possible and that kind of thing. So what I started doing is doing for free, like doing free challenges. Okay,
mm,
come in for free for 7 days, or just try this, or do the bacon experiment, even try that.
mm-hmm.
Because I know what's going to happen, right? I know they're going to start, and then it's going to get their attention, because they're like, okay, something is different here. I'm not only losing the weight, but I'm not hungry. What's going on with that? Like, why am I not
Mm,
craving stuff? That's a wake up call. That's as soon as that light bulb goes on. I know when it did for me, and it was the same people. It was like Jimmy Moore was one of the people that influenced me, and Abel James.
yeah.
So I just did a carnivore podcast recently, and then Abel James actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, like, why don't you come on and kind of tell your story? It's kind of like a
Awesome.
full circle." So really excited about that.
Nice.
But yeah, it was people like that, and listening to Jimmy Moore, I listened to, just went all in on it, and I remember when I finally realized, okay, this is going to work, because I've been still looking for the catch. I was always looking for the catch. What's the catch to
Mm,
this? There's no way that I'm eating bacon and bacon burgers and all this type of stuff that I love, and I've always liked it. Just tossing away the bun is kind of the only thing I ever had to do. I wish I knew that in my 20s, but then I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't have learned what I have now.
right.
So I kind of look at it that way. It's all learning and that kind of thing. But I
Mm,
couldn't sleep. I remember I couldn't sleep at night, because that's how excited I was. Like, okay, I can do this
Oh
because
yeah.
there was never a time ever, even when I'd lose out most of the weight, I thought this is a diet still, right? It has to be a lifestyle change. And I renamed my program this year to lifestyle, like Keto Camp Lifestyle, because it was like, it has to be a lifestyle. It's
Mm,
not going to work. Even the keto diet is not going to work. It's not a 30, 50 pound thing and then go back to
right.
normal. At least for me, there's no chance. As soon as if I start adding any of those foods back in, that's it. It's all over again.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and I know that. I think there's a lot of people like that. Not everybody, like you said, you see some people that can seem to get away with murder. They can have anything and everything
Oh
and
yeah.
they never seem to
Hmm.
gain anything. But for a lot of us, you do get insulin resistant over time. And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about when you're talking
Hmm.
about being close to diabetic, pre-diabetic, being very insulin resistant. It's like that
Mm,
takes time to heal, a long time to heal, if it ever is going to heal.
mm,
So you can't do what other people, you can't get away with, I guess, what other people can get away with. So you
right.
do need to be strict, and but you don't want that to be boring or bland, and it doesn't have to be. It just has
Hmm.
to be a little different than what other people are doing. And so I like everything you said about spices, and you become a master at adding some heat in sometimes, maybe,
Hmm.
or doing different things, or slow cooking and smoking foods. And
Hmm.
I think all that stuff's important. It is all about enjoying your foods too. And then it's
Mm,
okay, you kind of, something clicks and it's like, I can do this. I can do this and I've just decided I can do this for the rest of my life. It's going to be a forever. It's not. Now, I agree with what you said too. It's like, it doesn't mean no one will ever see me have a piece of cake in my life. Maybe that will happen. I can't predict the future, but
right.
I've decided that I'm going to do keto and at times carnivore. If I ever do fall off the wagon, I know what to do. Or if I do get
Right.
sidetracked, I know you kind of got to reel it back in quickly. And I find going strict carnivore or something is almost like abstinence to that addiction, right?
Hmm.
Um, and we talked about carb addiction for a minute earlier. And one thing, I don't know if you found this, I find it's more, you did say the processed foods, and I agree with that. I find carbs and fats together. So I did a little experiment.
Mm,
I did a live stream once, and I was like, out of 1 to 10, how excited are you about seeing this food? And I would show different stuff, right? Like flour, sugar, butter, and all this.
mm.
And then you put a cookie or a piece of cake, or it's when you combine all those things,
Oh yeah.
cheese, a block of cheese. Yeah, it's good. And cheese can be a little addictive. There's something to that too, where casein breaks down to casomorphines, and it is actually a little bit addictive. So you were right about when you mentioned the cheese being
Hmm.
easy to overeat. Not
Oh
all
yeah.
cheese is equal either, I would say. So the very strong flavored ones are hard, but yeah, I find that carbs and fats together is more of a problem even than just
Mm.
carbs, because there's a lot of people that are very successful going, or like fairly successful anyways, going to, now, my keto community is going to hate me for saying this, but straight carbs or
Oh yeah.
potatoes. Potatoes are
Oh yeah.
very satiating. And I know a lot of people that do that as an experiment. They'll try the potato hack or the potato diet, and they're like, wow, it actually does fill me up, and it did work. But as soon as you start putting butter on there,
Right.
or French fries, right? I could eat 10 pounds of French fries,
Right.
but would I eat 10 pounds of just plain potato with, I wouldn't. I know I couldn't.
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
I kind of found that the carbs and fats together, and it makes sense.
Mm.
The carbs raise your glucose, it raises insulin, and then the fat you're eating with it's all getting stored, and you start
Hmm.
using that glucose. And then after a very short period of time, you want to do it again, and you want to do it again. And um, now, when you said that when you first fell off the wagon, you gained all that weight back, was it more carbs, or was it carbs and fats?
Oh, it
Talk
was
to us.
carbs and fat. It was carbs and fats. It was
Yeah.
pizza, burgers, ice cream, um, cakes. I was eating like I'm not exaggerating when I was saying I was eating every moment I was awake. Like I was, like I could take you through. My coach actually at one point said, "Do you remember what you were eating back then?" And I'm like, "I remember it vividly." So we actually sat down and I put it into a put it into my macros tracker, my
Oh
calorie
yeah.
tracker, and I stopped when I saw 25,000 calories.
Wow.
And it wasn't that was a special cheat day. That was like one of the days of the week. Like
Mhm.
I was getting up and on the drive to work, hitting McDonald's, and then hitting Dunkin' Donuts when I got off the highway, and then going into work, and then going to Burger King, On the way home, I had the same exact order that I got from Wendy's every day on the way home, just for the drive home. I had a 15-minute drive home, and I had a fast food order that I got 6 junior bacon cheeseburgers with a supersized, or whatever what they called it, biggie sized Coca-Cola. Like, I was drinking soda like it was going out of style. Like, I think you're right. Like, I think eating, 5 pounds of plain boiled potatoes versus eating 5 pounds of plain boiled potatoes mashed with a stick of butter and a cup of cream are two very different things. Like, in terms
Yeah.
of, how much I could eat and how much I would take in. Like, I think and that's why, like, I have friends that have lost 300 pounds eating, chicken and rice with a little hot sauce. And
Yeah.
that, they eat chicken, rice, and broccoli with a little hot sauce. They do the old school bodybuilding diet, and they lose the weight
Yeah.
and they're satisfied. And people are like, "Well, you're eating carbs, so how are you losing weight? You're eating all those carbs." And I'm like, "Yeah, but he's not adding half a stick of butter to his rice. Like, there's not, the chicken isn't fried. Like,
Mhm.
there's a difference in terms of how the food is prepared. But I know
Yeah.
for me, when I try those kind of meals, I'm still hungry. Like, I
Yeah.
do, my satiation is different. Like, because we're all different
Yeah.
people, like you said. Like, I think, like, it's hard. Like when you brought up the idea of like 2 pounds of bacon, like that's exciting, to think about to start. But when you
Mhm.
get a pound and a half into 2 pounds of bacon, you're eating bacon. That's a lot of bacon. Like,
Mhm.
you're going to get full. Like, you're going to have some satiation from that. And I think that's one of the things. I don't want to wax nostalgic about how magical bacon can be, but like, bacon can give you that like crispy crunch, that you crave sometimes from
Yeah.
foods. But not like a bag of potato chips will, not like deep
Mhm.
fried French fries will. Like, it's not the same thing. Like, it's just we just
Yeah.
don't treat it the same way when we eat it, psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And I kind of that's where I've landed only this year, and it's been, like I said, 6.5 years for me. It's been, and I don't know why I didn't see it more clearly, but I watched a talk actually from Dr. Robert Sives, and he wasn't afraid to call it. He called carbs a drug, and
Mm-hmm.
he said, if you are an addict, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You're going to agree. And I found myself nodding my head to your every minute that you've been talking here, because I kind of feel like it's the same way. I could have ended up this exact same way easily.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that because of the addiction cycle you're in, and it just never ends. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there is no breaks. And he's explained that before. I think something similar to that. Like, it's like you're on a runaway train with no brakes,
Mm-hmm.
and you start adding in whole foods and proteins and getting rid of one of them. You can't, like carbs we can do without, and we don't need any carbs. Zero carb, we can still survive. You can't really do that with fat, or you can't really do, so you got to kind of pick what energy
Mm-hmm.
source. And carbs definitely spurs our hunger the most by far, and gets us into that cycle. So yeah, I think, maybe we should wrap this one up. Really enjoyed it. I'd love to have you on again sometime. I think, you have lots of, you've had to really think about it.
Mm.
You've had to put in the thought. You've had to kind of figure out all the little things, and because some of those little things can become a big thing, right? If you don't
Oh yeah.
address it and look at it. So I feel like you've really looked at all the stuff, and I've had to do that too, right? So really can
Mm.
relate. I think we're the same age. Even I
Mm.
was born in '73,
So was I.
in December. So yeah, I kind of feel like, I've shared a lot of the same thoughts and views on it, and I take it
Mm.
seriously because some people's lives do depend on this kind
Mm.
of information,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, I think you've shared a lot here today. I really appreciate it, and I hope people follow you, and I hope your story blows up because, I mean, uh, you know, because of all the photos that you have too, and you have hundreds of, and I don't have a lot of photos because
Mm.
I hated my picture taken, which you've probably heard that 100 times.
Oh yeah.
Don't want the photo taken and stuff. So I don't have a lot of before photos and that kind of thing. And you do, right? You're
Oh
right out
yeah.
there, with all your foods. Like, it's amazing. And I think, it's could capture, a lot of media attention. I think would
Mm.
bring a lot of attention to keto and what's possible. And, you could help a lot of people, for sure. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on and doing this interview, and love to do it again sometime. Maybe we could do an Instagram live or something
Yeah,
sometime.
definitely.
What is your Instagram right before we get off here? It's
Gormy underscore
Gormy.
Gormy 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 underscore goes underscore keto.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Gormy.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.